Hello guys, welcome back to our YouTube channel. In this video we are gonna see, what if Naruto was the heir of the Uzumaki clan and got harem? Part 8. If you want more awesome fan fiction like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. So without wasting any time, let's get into the video. Hokage-sama. The signal name rang loud and clear. It was a voice that seemed to only deliver bad news. Not once had he ever heard his name called out with such urgency only to have the news following it be pleasant. Never had he heard Hokage-sama. You may take the day off, there is no paperwork today, Orochimaru has turned himself in, we have found the fountain of eternal youth. It was never anything he wished to hear, and this time didn't have any exception. As Sarutobi finished his mental thoughts and let out a grief and exhausted filled sigh, he saw his door thrown open by the man who had yelled his name. Yes, what is it? The old Hokage asked tiredly, rubbing his temples in anticipation. Whatever had happened now would surely cause him mental stress. He was already working on quelling the headache that his head was slowly giving birth to. The man stood panting slightly, his hands on his knees as he tried to catch his breath. How he can sprint as far as he does, shout my name, and kick my door open, yet not have enough energy to simply tell me what the commotion is about, is beyond me, the Hokage thought as he watched the man with slight irritation, but he didn't let the emotion show on his face. Uchiha Sasuke. The man panted out as he slowly stood up straight, the panting slowly subsiding, allowing the man to speak. The Hokage sighed in frustration, his mind automatically went into what he had dubbed anti-Uchiha mode. He had developed the ill-harbored feelings after Uchiha Sasuke's trial, along with the small civil war that had taken place in the Konoha council chambers. Even after Sasuke's punishment was given to him, even after he told the council numerous times, even after he had repeatedly reminded them of the boy's charges and the events that had taken place due to his actions, the council still tried, faithfully, every week to get the Uchiha a clean card. What about the Uchiha? If this is another attempt by the council to get the boy out of prison, so help me. The Hokage muttered as he folded his hands in front of his chest. The man shook his head, a quick jerk from side to side that looked as though it should have broken his neck. No, Hokage-sama. Orochimaru's forces attacked the maximum underground security and have taken Uchiha Sasuke. The man shouted and the Hokage froze, his hands clenching together tightly, and as a result his knuckles turned ghostly white. He didn't stare at the man in front of him, rather his eyes just were focused on him. His mind was running faster than he would be able to in his prime. Orochimaru, how did you learn about that establishment? It has been kept an utmost secret, the Hokage thought as he ran through all of the people who knew of the prison where Konoha's most dangerous enemies were sent. Amura, Kaharu, Minato, Jiraiya, Ibiki, Anko, Iruka, Kakashi, Hiashi, Shikaku, Inoichi, myself and the Hokage snapped back to reality as he looked at the man in front of him, a cold seriousness crossed his face. I want teams 8, 9, 10, and 11 here now. The Hokage snapped and the man nodded before dashing out of the room. The Hokage quickly stood to his feet and slammed his hands down onto the desk. His eyes were set in a cold gaze as he ran through what needed to be done. Hokage-sama. A voice said, announcing its arrival into the room. Sarutobi looked up and found himself staring at an Anbu who was kneeling on the floor. The man's head was bowed, his face covered by his mask. The Hokage grunted with distaste. Now is not the time for that. What do you have to report? The old man demanded, and the Anbu stood to his feet quickly and began to give the Hokage the details of what had happened. 5 ninja infiltrated the prison and began to tear through our forces. They were powerful, something we have never seen before. Orochimaru was nowhere to be seen, but the leader of the invasion was Yakushi Kabuto. We think that Orochimaru gave him the location of the prison, but we don't know how he knew of where it was. Other than that, we have need of medical units. We suffered several losses but a few injuries. The Anbu said, giving the man a quick and short report, only saying what was important at the time. Also, the Uchiha went with them willingly, but we don't know where they are heading. They headed towards Konoha, but for what reason I do not know. The Hokage sat down in his chair, his eyes hard and calculating. What would Orochimaru's men be doing by bringing Sasuke back to Konoha, where the ninja populace would quickly intercept them and destroy the boy? The Hokage clenched his fists yet again, feeling a burning in his palms as his nails cut into his flesh, drawing his own blood. Before he could ponder the thoughts anymore, the doors flew open and teams 8 and 9 immediately arrived, worried looks on some of their faces while tired looks were on others. Hokage-sama. Why have you called us this late at night? Rock Lee asked as he yawned, rubbing his right eye with the back of his right hand. I have a mission for teams 8, 9, 10, and 11. Wait until teams 10 and 11 arrive and then I will give you more information. The Hokage announced in a commanding tone, his eyes were looking over the genin in front of him. And Yuzuka Kiba was wide awake, his eyes glancing around nervously while Lakimaru, who was lying at his feet due to the fact that the dog no longer was small enough to rest atop the teen's head, let his brown eyes stare at the village leader. Hinata was nervously clenching the hem of her coat tightly, her head was tilted forward as she muttered quietly to herself, mumbles that were incoherent and, at this point, useless to the Hokage. Teammate's final member Shino stood stock still, not showing any emotion nor talking much, just like others of his clan. The Hokage was about to let his eyes travel to the next person when his eyes opened in quick surprise before becoming serious again. There was the slightest trail of drool making its way out of Shino's mouth, and the Hokage could hear a steady snore, soft and nearly unhearable, coming from the boy. Surprising, I may have to watch his father at future clan meetings to see if his son is following in his footsteps. The Hokage thought mentally as his gaze traveled to the next person. Ikeniji was standing just as stoic as his uncle did, nothing but seriousness written across his face. He was watching the Hokage with his pale milky-white eyes, no doubt trying to figure out what kind of mission would require the presence of every genin team in rotation and on duty at that time. Rock Lee, like Shino, was sleeping on his feet, but it was much more obvious since he had a large snot bubble that inflated as he breathed out and deflated when he breathed in, hanging from his nose. He was swaying slightly, and the Hokage raised an eyebrow, giving the boy a look of disgusted amusement. Next to Lee was his teammate Tenten, and she was slightly tired, but like her teammate Niji was at attention. She was looking at everyone curiously to figure out what was going on. The Hokage nodded, happy that each looked ready to move out already. He wouldn't have to worry about them having to waste time and go back to their houses in order to prepare themselves for the sudden mission. As he finished observing the genin, the door opened again, and in stumbled a tired Shikamaru and Shimjai, both supporting each other as they walked. Behind them was Sakura, who was looking around in shock at everyone in the room. Behind her were her two new teammates that she had received shortly after Sasuke had been sentenced to prison, and Naruto was, against his own will, declared a missing nin. Her first teammate was one that had many conflicts with her in the beginning, but the two surprisingly began to get along after a few weeks, and now Ino and Sakura could be found walking around with none other than Ami, Sakura's past tormentor. The girl was just as shocked as Sakura was, and her mouth was slightly opened, mumbling something to the final teammate of Team 11. Imaji Hiro, a quiet boy who didn't really stand out among others but was strong. Not as strong as some of the original Konoha 12, but strong enough to defend himself when challenged to a spar. The boy was the original member of Team 11 and the last surviving member. His teammates and his sensei had been killed in the invasion, and it was then that the boy had become silent and unresponsive. Nothing as bad as Sasuke was, but since being paired with Sakura and Ami, the boy had began to open up more. Hokage-sama. What do you need from us? Sakura asked as every genin lined up, 2 rows of 6 and 5, teams 8 and 10 in the back, and teams 9 and 11 in the front. The pink-haired girl stared at the Hokage curiously, but the old man held up a hand and looked over at Shikamaru and Shimjai. Where is Ino? Did you guys not inform her of my sudden calling? He asked, and Shikamaru shrugged and turned towards the door. She was with me when we got Shimjai, but then she suddenly remembered that she needed something and ran home. She should be here sooner or later. The Nara said as he cast a quick and worried glance towards the door. The Hokage nodded before he returned to the matter at hand. Most of the genin had come, and Ino would be filled in on the matters later when she met up with her teammates. From what I believe to be a couple hours ago, Orochimaru's forces infiltrated Konoha's maximum underground prison. The Hokage said, and the genin stared at him, confusion written all over their faces. You wouldn't know, it is a village secret. The man said, and he saw many nods. The objective of the infiltration was to capture Uchiha Sasuke, which wasn't hard. Sasuke has gone with Orochimaru's forces, and I can only guess that he believes to travel back with them. I want all of you to pursue them and be warned, the infiltration team consisted of 5 members including Yakushi Kabuto. Last we saw, Sasuke and the team were moving towards Konoha for some unknown reason, the Hokage said, and the genin nodded. Hokage-sama, why would they head towards the area that Sasuke is wanted? Sakura asked curiously, and the Hokage heard several others mutter in agreement and disbelief. The Hokage was going to speak, but the genius in the room spoke. He wants power. Shikamaru muttered and stepped forward and eyed the Hokage seriously. How didn't you figure it out yet? The boy exclaimed and gestured out the window and into the distance. He wants to revive his clan, but how would he do that if he had no documents on them? How would he learn his family techniques and different styles if he didn't have their records, their scrolls, anything? Shikamaru said, and the Hokage cursed as he stood to his feet in anger. Curse my blindness, how did I not see that they would return for those things? I knew they should have been removed. I want all of you to surround the Uchiha compound. If anyone tries to enter, attack and capture them. Sasuke has restraint seals on him and his Sharingan has been sealed, so don't worry about it." The Hokage shouted and the genin teams quickly dashed from the room, heading towards the most depressing place in the village, the place that an entire clan was wiped out in a night, the Uchiha compound. Konoha, Uchiha compound. 11:30 p.m. "I smell blood," Kiba whispered as they all drew closer. As soon as the words left his lips, Hinata and Neji both activated their Byakugans and searched the area before them carefully, making sure they weren't walking into a trap. "Oh no," Hinata whispered as her body began to tremble slightly. "Pick up the pace." Neji shouted as he sent a burst of chakra racing through his legs, causing him to fly forward. Shikamaru was by him in an instant, a serious look set on his normally bored and lazy face. "What is it, Neji?" the boy asked in concern as they drew ever closer to the compound. "It's Ino," the boy muttered, and Shikamaru froze on the pole he was standing on while the other ninja passed him in blurs. Chimjai landed next to him and grabbed his shoulder. "Come on, we have to hurry." The chubby teen shouted in fear as he pulled Shikamaru behind him. While the two members of Team 10 started to catch up, the other ninjas landed in front of the compound, and after they got a signal from Neji they dashed in, Sakura in the lead as her head wiped back and forth, trying to find her best friend. As her eyes drifted she found her. Ino was lying in the middle of the street, her clothes torn and bloody, and a small pool of blood around her. "Ino!" Sakura cried out in fear and grief as she dashed forward and fell to her knees, sliding up to the girl who was sprawled on the ground. The other ninjas hung back slightly while they watched Sakura rest by Ino's side. Shikamaru and Chimjai landed behind them and didn't waste time being nice and pushed through them all. "What's wrong with her?" Shikamaru demanded as he knelt down by a shaking Sakura. His eyes drifted over Ino's beaten body and his eyes slowly widened with horror as things became clear to him. "No," he whispered. Ino's shirt was torn in several places, revealing her bandage that wrapped around her chest. A lot of the bandage was red and in a few places it was torn, revealing creamy skin beneath that was marred with gashes. The girl's chest was slightly exposed, but no one noticed it really, it just registered subconsciously. "Ino, he didn't," Chimjai whispered in rage. The girl's skirt was gone. The bandage around her legs was torn and slightly bloodied. "He did," Sakura muttered as tears fell down her face. Shikamaru jumped to his feet with a loud cry and turned to Neji. "Neji? Lee? Kiba? Shino? Chimjai? Tenten? Hero? Let's go." Shikamaru cried as he took off, the genin he had called out didn't hesitate to follow him. They figured out what had happened just as easily as Sakura, Shikamaru, and Chimjai had. While they all ran off, Hinata and Ami ran forward toward Sakura, whose shoulders were shaking slightly as she cried. "Is she alive?" Ami demanded and Sakura weakly nodded her head. "We have to get her to the hospital," she shouted, but Sakura was unresponsive. Ami growled and took a step forward and grabbed the pink-haired girl's shoulder and turned her around. The girl's tear-streaked face looked at her under the moonlight. Smack. Sakura was knocked out of her shock, her right hand shot up and touched her cheek that now stung after Ami's slap. The pink-haired girl stared at her teammate in disbelief before she understood. It would do her no good to sit here and cry over what had been done, she had to save her best friend before she died. The pink-haired girl stood to her feet and acted quickly. "Hinata, I need your coat," she shouted, and the Hokage hesitated for a second before slipping the coat off. She stood with a tight black shirt on, fishnet around the collar, and it showed off her form, but neither of the other girls present cared much. Sakura snatched the coat and laid it on the still form of Ino, covering her body. "Ami, grab her legs but be careful," Sakura ordered, and the purple-haired girl nodded and slowly bent down and pushed Ino's legs, which were slightly spread, together. Sakura grabbed the girl's shoulders and gently began to lift her, while Mai did the same with her feet. "Hinata. Brace her back," Sakura said, and Hinata nodded. After getting situated, the girls quickly began to move towards the Konoha hospital, hoping and praying that they got there in time. Izugakure, Yuzu Gates. 3:47 p.m., prior to Konoha incident and 3 hours from when Naruto woke. Whoa, Naruto whispered in awe as he stood before the gates of Yuzugakure. The city lay before him. The blonde didn't move, didn't speak anymore, instead he just let his eyes wander over the city that lay before him, and he did so in awe. The last time he had been there, the entire city had been a sight that was full of destroyed houses, broken cement blocks littered the ground, and there was large heaping piles of rubble. The ground was barren and depressing, it yielded no life, no vegetation, and not many animals could be found. The blonde no longer saw any of those things. Granted, he didn't see a huge looming village like Konoha or Kumo, what he saw was a small village that had the potential to grow much larger. The first thing he noticed was that all of the destroyed houses, all of the rubble and left behind debris was gone. The ground was clean, and when he noticed this, he noticed another thing: sand. Soft white sand covered the entire ground that Yuzugakure was on. Naruto turned towards Gaara, who was staring at him with a blank look. I'm guessing that you had a part in the sand. He asked and the red-headed boy nodded slowly and Naruto chuckled lightly before returning his gaze upon the village. There were several houses that were about 2 stories tall and there were others that were only a story tall. Naruto began walking forward, ignoring the ninja that were behind him. As he walked through the large gate that loomed over him, he allowed a small smile to cross his face. The gate was much like Konoha's, a large arch, only this gate was black and seemed to shine slightly, and as he looked closer, he found that it was made from some type of black rock. "How did you guys make that?" he asked quietly, and it was Zabuza who answered his question. "Odin users, we have a couple here and they worked hard on this," the man said as he took a few strides forward so that he stood next to Naruto. "After we placed you inside the chamber, Gaara, Itachi, Haku and myself all returned to the island. We began to process of cleaning up and while those 3 worked I traveled around and gathered together old friends and looked for a few people who would be willing to help us, people who wanted a new life," Zabuza said and turned towards the 12 ninja trailing behind them. "These are some of the people who decided to join, they are our strongest ninja," Zabuza said and Naruto nodded before returning his gaze to the village. "How big is the village so far?" Naruto asked and Zabuza scratched his chin as he tried to think of how big the village was. "I'd say that the island is 25 miles long and 15 miles wide, with a few smaller islands surrounding it. Now when the village is done it will hopefully be a bit smaller than Konoha, but as of now, it may be the size of the village in Wave Country. It isn't huge since we haven't had many people to utilize and have us help build." Zabuza muttered and turned his head, his eyes roaming over the ninja behind him. "Genji, come here." Zabuza called out to a man and said man ran forward, stopping next to Zabuza and staring at the man with a confused expression. "What is it, Zabuza-sama?" the man known as Genji asked. Naruto looked the man over and saw that he was wearing black pants that were tied around his knees and also around his ankles with white tape. He wore a blue ninja vest over a black mesh shirt and on his hip with a small saber. His kunai holster was on his left leg and his shuriken holster was on his right. The man was slightly shorter than Zabuza who already stood at 6'3", and he had soft brown hair that hung down low so that it slightly covered his brown eyes. He also had a scar on his cheek that stretched from the corner of his eye downwards, ending in the middle of his cheek. "First, don't call me Sama," Zabuza said in his gruff voice before continuing, seeing a small smirk appear on Naruto's face. "This is Naruto, my nephew," Zabuza said, and Genji turned to Naruto and held out a hand, reaching in front of Zabuza, which slightly irked the man. "Hey there, nice to finally meet the heir," Genji said cheerfully and Naruto smiled slightly and took the man's hand in his own and shook it. "Naruto, this is Genji, he used to be a Kirin, but he defected a while after I did. He used to be a Junin, even though I don't agree," Zabuza muttered, and Genji rolled his eyes at the statement. "Anyways, he is one of our Doton users, it's his natural affinity, and so he is able to utilize it better than others. As a matter of fact, we don't let people even work with the rock structures unless they have an affinity for earth," Zabuza muttered and returned to what he was saying. "Anyways, Genji is our construction guy, he coordinates what needs to be built. That is what he has been doing for the last few years, besides collecting bounties," Zabuza said with a small chuckle. "Hey, both jobs paid good money. Besides, if I hadn't been collecting bounties I wouldn't have run into you," Genji said with a small grin before looking at Naruto. "This guy found me a few days after I had set off to collect his bounty. It took some time, but he convinced me that I would be happier here. No one knows about this place quite yet, so all of us have been safe from hunter nins or enemies," Genji said and Naruto nodded. "Good, that'll make it easier for us to get our act together," Naruto said and turned to Zabuza, who was waiting for the two to finish their little conversation. "Are you waiting for something?" Naruto asked in a smart tone and was forced to duck under a swat aimed at his head. He ducked a slow though and felt Zabuza's hand hit the top back of his head. "Ow. You big jerk," Naruto grumbled. "Shut it, brat. Now, like I was going to ask. Genji, approximately what structures do we have built and how many of each do we have?" the man asked and Genji tapped his chin as he pushed his lips out as he thought about everything. "Well, we have built 34 two-story houses and they are all complete, 21 one-story houses, we restored 4 of the clan manors and have yet to restore the other 5 that have somewhat survived abandonment. We finished the archway there and are working on plans to start building the surrounding gate that will help guard our village. We have 15 one-story houses under construction and 17 two-story houses under construction. We have finished building the prison just a couple days ago, along with the village council chamber and also," Genji said and grinned. "We just put the finishing touches on the Izuka Gate Tower yesterday," Genji said and Naruto stared at him in disbelief. How the hell did he remember all of those things? The blonde wondered in amazement. He shook his head and looked at the village, his village. Naruto felt a small grin appear on his face as he made the realization. So giving me a rough estimate, how long until we can really establish ourselves? Naruto asked and Zabuza snorted. We haven't made much progress in this last year on making our village a real village. It'll be a little while until we can establish ourselves as one of the great villages, but we can surely become strong now that you have woken up. Zabuza said, and Naruto nodded hesitantly. Yeah, now that I'm awake. Yuzu, council chambers. 4:05 p.m. Okay, we can finally get down to discussing things, Zabuza said as he settled himself in a chair. They all sat around a large circular table that seated everyone in the room, all 10 of them. The table was meant to seat many more, but that wasn't a concern because there wasn't a real need to seat 24 people at the moment. Zabuza stood to his feet and pointed at Genji. You know Genji. He said and Naruto chuckled as Zabuza pointed a woman who sat next in the circle and from there he went around until he ended on himself. That is Uzumaki Taka, she is our cousin. Zabuza said and Naruto stiffened upwards, but Zabuza held up a finger. No. No questions like that until we are done here, we can get to know each other's side stories later. Next is that depressing guy there. Zabuza said pointing at a boy who looked rather cheery and wasn't sitting in a chair. Instead he was crouching on the table looking around at everyone. He had small smirk on his face and his green eyes were a very light color, almost looking slightly creamy. He had black hair that hung down to his shoulders but was cut wildly, making it look cool and untamed. His bangs hung down in front of his eyes but were brushed off to the sides. He wore a tight black coat that had a hood on the back with heavy white fur around the edge. The coat sleeves cut off slightly before his wrists, but instead of bare hands he wore gloves that most likely covered a lot of his arm, but he only showed a bit of it, the gloves stretched up his entire hand past his knuckles and up to the first joint of his fingers. He had a ring, with a large metal skull on them, on each of his middle fingers. The coat cut off a bit before his hips and it was zipped up all the way, but under the coat he wore a tight black shirt. For pants he wore a pair of black tight pants that were slightly baggy, but otherwise were tight. He had metal studs stretched around his thighs and he wore a pair of black ninja sandals. I'm not depressing. The boy said and laughed. I just don't dress vibrantly, I'm used to laying low. He said and Zabuza shook his head. That is Rake, little brat still won't tell me his clan name though. I found him wandering through the forests one day and after the brat attacked me I convinced him that he should join our village. He was a Chunin back in Kumo. Zabuza said and moved on to the next person, leaving Rake to smile at Naruto. Zabuza pointed at another man who was rather old and had a white scruffy beard around his jaw and mouth. His hair was white and short, his eyes were gray and radiated wisdom. The name's Shigo, Amori Shigo. Better not forget it you twerp. Shigo said in a heavy voice and glared at Naruto. The blonde stared at him cautiously, his hands clenched under the table. The man looked strong, he wore a gray open collar shirt that revealed that he had some muscle, and leaning against his chair was a good-sized club, a club that had 4 steel spikes on one side. That guy looks crazy, Naruto thought mentally as he looked at Zabuza, who was staring at him with a small smirk on his face. Scared? The man asked and Naruto scoffed at him. That was my instructor when I first became a genin. Naruto's gaze drifted from Zabuza back to Shigo who was staring at him sternly. I'll teach you yet. Won't be a little smartass when I'm done with you. You'll be a real ninja. Shigo bellowed and crossed his arms. Naruto just nodded his head while Zabuza chuckled and moved on to the next person who happened to be a woman that looked to be around the same age as Zabuza. That right there is Azora Hana, she is from Taki, a Genjutsu specialist, but she still has the rank of Chunin. Zabuza said, and Hana nodded at Naruto who gave her a small smile and nod of recognition as Zabuza continued. You know Achi, Gaara, yourself, Haku, and then me Zabuza. Zabuza said finishing his introductions. Now, down to business. What happened? He asked and Naruto stared at him in shock. What? Naruto asked and everyone continued to stare at him. No. I will ask the questions and then I'll tell you of my 7 days in hell. Naruto said as he crossed his arms, his voice growing serious. His playful mood could only last before so long before he brought out his serious side and right now he wanted answers. Little brat Shigo muttered as he glared at Naruto. The old man flexed his muscles as though trying to intimidate the blonde, but it didn't work as effectively as he would have hoped. You don't like it, old man? Then get out of here. Naruto said as he shrugged. I don't feel like reliving all of the things I went through, sorry if it's kind of painful. Naruto said looking at Zabuza, his eyes finally showing something that Zabuza had known he would see for a year. In the normally cheerful blue eyes was accusing. Naruto's eyes bore into Zabuza, speaking the words before they ever left the blonde's mouth. Why didn't you tell me? He demanded and Zabuza sighed. The man leaned forward and rested his chin on his right hand which he brought up from his lap. He looked around the room before his eyes settled on his nephew. I didn't think it would happen so soon. I thought it would happen well after the Chunin exams, I was going to tell you. Zabuza muttered and Naruto shook his head and slammed his hands down on the table, a look of anger crossing his face. Do you know what I went through? He almost yelled, making some of the room's occupants tense up. I had to face some of my deepest memories and some crazed demon that was hell-bent on beating me and taking over my body. Don't you think you should tell me about that? Naruto hissed as he pulled his hands off the table and crossed his arms angrily, slamming the limbs against his body as he looked around. Why is he here? Naruto demanded and looked at Itachi. Hey. Don't give me that look, asshole. Itachi yelled as Naruto glared at him. The Kusa boy clenched his fists together as Naruto continued to glare at him. I got dragged here by Sandy Locks. It took a couple of months, but I warmed up to this place, but what really sealed the deal was when you remembered that I was going to kick your ass for attacking my village when I woke up. Naruto spit out and Itachi stared at him before the boy burst out laughing at something that Naruto didn't understand. The blonde stared at the blue-haired boy, waiting for the laughter to stop, waiting to be let in on the joke. Naruto let his gaze briefly flicker over the other people in the room and saw many others looking at him with hidden feelings, and that was when Naruto sensed something wasn't right. He had a gut instinct. What happened? He asked and Zabuza shook his head. The blonde stared at him in shock. Was Konoha destroyed? The blonde whispered and Zabuza snorted. Konoha? Destroyed? Yeah right, damn village is still there with all their worthless ninja. Zabuza said in disgust and reached into his back pocket and pulled out a small book and threw it across the table. The book suddenly opened to a page as it slid in front of Naruto. The blonde looked around before his eyes looked down at the page of the book and that was when his heart almost shattered. Uzumaki Naruto. Age at time of defection 13. Hair? Blonde. Eyes? Blue. Height? 5'6". Affinities? Suiton. Special techniques? Kage Bunshin, Summoning, Foxes, Rasengan. Rank? Genin. Special status? Holder of Kikbi no Kitsune, large amount of chakra, high stamina, fast regeneration. Bingo book rank? D. Naruto slowly closed the book, his eyes becoming softer as he realized what that meant. He shut the book tightly and held onto it for a little bit before he looked at Itachi. I'm sorry for yelling at you, he muttered, and with a jerk of his hand, sent the book sliding back towards Zabuza. The man caught it easily with one hand before he slipped it back into his pocket and stared at Naruto. You have no ties to Konoha anymore, Naruto. Zabuza said, and Naruto nodded. Do you have any more questions? The man asked and Naruto looked around. How big is our population? The blonde asked and Zabuza shrugged and thought for a moment. I'd say we have about 100 people total, about 30 of them are ninja. We have 10 Chunin, 15 Chunin, and 5 Genin, you, Gaara, Itachi, Haku, and also another girl who we found running from Kumo. Zabuza said, and Naruto nodded. So what is our plan of action? Naruto asked as he looked around. We need to gather more people, we need to expand our population. The blonde teen said and Zabuza nodded. Yeah, but we also have to make sure our village is strong enough to fend off any attempts to eradicate it. Sooner or later people will catch wind of this new village, and no doubt so will our enemies, and they will attack us. Zabuza said, and Naruto nodded. My goal is to get a team together and sneak into Kiri and spread word to those who need to escape. As you know, the bloodline purge is still going on unfortunately, and I know that there are other Uzumaki hidden within Kurigakure. We need to get our family out, along with anyone else who used to reside in Yuzu. Zabuza said, and he heard a chorus of agreement from the older ninja present. We just have one huge problem with everything though. Zabuza said, and everyone looked at him. What's that? Reik asked curiously and Zabuza looked at him and then looked at Naruto, his hand coming up to point at the boy. Him? Reik asked in shock. Yeah, Naruto is the heir, he will be our leader. It is his birthright. Zabuza said, and Naruto's eyes opened in shock. Then how is that a problem? The blonde shouted, a small amount of fear in his voice. Did Zabuza mean that he was an obstacle? That's what it was sounding like to the blonde boy. Because unfortunately when we sealed you away we activated all of the restraining seals, Zabuza muttered, and Taka gasped. No, she whispered and Zabuza nodded. Naruto looked at the shocked woman and then at Zabuza. Wait, what's wrong with that? He asked, afraid of the answer. His blue eyes watched Zabuza carefully, waiting for a new surprise. When someone goes through the process you did, they have to be sealed away like that. Those seals you saw were special, they are meant to weaken the person inside over time. Zabuza said, and slowly things began to make sense to Naruto and others in the room. Usually it took people about 2 to 5 weeks to either die or live. When they lost, the seals had already absorbed enough of the person's energy, chakra, and also deteriorated enough muscle to make sure that the demon couldn't do much damage before it was dealt with. Zabuza said, and Naruto dropped his head. How long did it take for them to make a comeback? He whispered, he feared the worst and Zabuza reluctantly spoke. About a month. The man said and Naruto looked up shaking his head. Is that why you had to carry me across the sea? Naruto asked. When they were about to leave the island Naruto had tried to step out onto the water in order to walk with Zabuza and Haku, but he found that he quickly fell into the water and he was finding it kind of hard to stay afloat. He had originally thought that was just because he hadn't used his chakra or muscles in over a year and so he needed to get back in shape, but he didn't know that he was actually losing muscle and chakra over the year he was in the room. Yes Naruto. You can't do anything, you have to start from scratch, but it's not all bad. Zabuza said and Naruto laughed. It's not all bad. He said raising his hands. An academy student could kick my ass. He said and this earned laughter from everyone in the room, it even caused a small grin to appear on Naruto's face. No, you can finally learn the Uzumaki style, the true one. Zabuza said and Naruto stared at him in disbelief. The man had just told him a new secret. How many fucking styles are there? Naruto asked in horror, he had already went through 7 months of training just to learn the regular and royal style, but now he just found out he would have to learn a new one. Zabuza chuckled slightly before he held up one finger. One. The other two I taught you are both just basic styles that were used by Yuzugakure Academy students. The man said with a slight grin which caused Naruto to let his shocked face melt into a look of anger. Settle down, there is something I need to tell you though. This will be a lot of information, Zabuza said as he stood to his feet. What is it? Naruto asked carefully and the man shrugged. You know that the Uzumaki were the best seal users there were, right? Zabuza asked and Naruto shook his head. Well, they were. Anyways, there is something special that we have. Zabuza began but was interrupted by Taka. You don't mean to make him go in there, do you? She demanded and Zabuza nodded. In order to get him caught up to where he was he must. Don't worry, I don't plan on making him stay in there long, Zabuza said and Taka nodded cautiously. Naruto was watching them in interest. What was Zabuza talking about? What are you guys arguing about? He asked and the man turned back towards him and began to speak slowly. Naruto, there are some things you must know. Things before we go on with what needs to be done. Zabuza said and waited for the blonde to nod. The man continued on, careful about what he was about to explain to Naruto. The Uzumaki built a special chamber and made very power space-time barrier seals on it. Remember how you thought you spent 7 days fighting your demon, but a year really passed? Zabuza asked and Naruto stared at him. Are you serious? I have to go through that again? Naruto shouted in anger and rejection. He didn't want to lose any more of his life pointlessly. No. It's different. A week in this chamber is the equivalent to a year. I want to bring you in here to train, there are things you have to learn, war is coming, and in order to lead our country you have to be strong. Zabuza said as he stared at Naruto sincerely. By us going into this chamber I can train you. Your muscles are almost gone, they have slowly deteriorated over the last year like I said. We need to get you in there so we can reverse the effects. The only downside is that we won't be able to work on jutsu at all. While in the chamber we can only focus on taijutsu, kinjutsu, conditioning, and chakra control. Zabuza said and Naruto stared at him before the boy hesitantly nodded. Fine, only because I need to get stronger, Naruto said reluctantly. When do we start? He asked and Zabuza smirked. Tonight. All we have to do is get you some training clothes and then we'll go to hell. Zabuza said as his eyes closed, an evil grin visible through the bandages on his face. Whoa, Naruto muttered as they finally stopped in front of the chamber where he was to train. Zabuza stood next to him, the man's arms were crossed in front of his chest as he surveyed the large chamber in front of them. On his other side was Taka, her blue hair cascaded down, blocking her features almost entirely, except for one half of her face where her right eye shone brightly, a crimson red that looked eerily like blood. Her hair reached her shoulders and had a dull sheen to it. All 3 of the Uzumaki wore the same training gear and on their backs were large backpacks. There were slight modifications to each training outfit to suit the needs of its wearer. Zabuza's consisted of a pair of black pants that were wrapped at the bottom with white tape and for a shirt he wore a tight muscle shirt. His giant sword was of course clamped onto his back like it always was. Naruto wore a pair of black pants identical to Zabuza's, taped and all, and instead of a muscle shirt for his shirt, he wore a tight orange t-shirt that had a white strip down the front. His hair was covered by a black hat that fit snugly over his head, resting just above his eyes, his blonde hair stuck out around the edges. The hat itched the blonde horrendously, but Zabuza said that it would keep his hair out of his face for now, otherwise he could just shave it all off. Naruto had chosen the hat without protest after that. On his back he had on a sheath for a plain sword, since no one had managed to find his sword back in Konoha. Naruto had decided that he wouldn't reveal his secrets just yet, secrets which included Ranjin and Shai being sealed within the sword. Taka stood next to him, and she wore a pair of tight black pants that clung to her legs but allowed her freedom to move. For a shirt she wore a black tee and on her waist she had a short sword hanging uselessly. Naruto stared at the chamber, his eyes slowly moving over it, taking in all of its details. Lack of details is more like it, the blonde boy thought as he turned his gaze over towards his uncle, a look of questioning on his face. "This is the great chamber you guys mentioned," Naruto said, bringing a single hand up and made a slow motion in front of him, gesturing to the chamber. "It's a giant flat wall," he exclaimed. The chamber was in fact not a chamber. The trio of Uzumaki had journeyed a ways into the forest until they had come to a cave that descended far into the earth, a flight of steps that seemed to keep going. Now they stood before the chamber that was in a large room, about the size of the academy classroom. It was bare except for two torches that flickered in their brackets that were fastened to the wall on either side of a large steel door that had no handle. Instead it had a medium-sized red spiral in the center of it. "Patience, you little brat," Zabuza grumbled as he stepped forward. He brought his hand up and placed it against the door firmly, his palm covering the red spiral. Naruto watched with curiosity as the door began to hum slightly before a small pulse of chakra made its way over the door and, slowly, the large door began to open up. At first a small crack had appeared in the middle of the doors, announcing it as not just a door but two halves of a door. Then slowly it slid apart until it receded into the wall and was gone from sight. In its place was a single wall of white light. "Whoa, so we're going in there?" Naruto asked as he began to step forward, but before his foot could make contact with the ground he was jerked backwards. The boy cried out as he fell to the ground heavily, catching himself on his hands before he slowly sat up and saw Taka glaring at him furiously. "What the hell is your problem?" he demanded as he got to his feet and stormed up in front of her. He glared at her, staring at her single red eye, waiting for an answer. "Naruto, leave her alone," Zabuza grumbled, and the blonde waited for a few seconds before complying. "Bitch," Naruto muttered as he turned back to Zabuza. "When are we going in?" he asked, and Zabuza's only answer was to reach into his bag and pull out a scroll. "As soon as we fully equip you," the man said as threw the scroll on the ground where it exploded in a cloud of smoke. Naruto watched as the smoke disappeared, leaving a pile of objects lying in its wake. "What the?" Naruto muttered as he stared at the items. "Wait, there are a few things we are going to work on in the chamber, your speed is one of them," Zabuza said and started grabbing the weights. "Strap this to your forearms," he said and threw two pairs of weights to Naruto. The blonde caught them and was thrown off balance suddenly, a look of shock crossing his face. The weights were heavy, almost too heavy for his muscle-deprived body to hold on to. "How much do these weigh?" he asked, his face twisted in shock and also from exerting effort to hold the weights. "Oh. You knows 15 pounds each, but don't worry, after a few days in the chamber you'll be somewhat used to them," Zabuza said and crossed his arms waiting for Naruto to strap the weights on. "Hurry up," the man barked and Naruto nodded and set to work. "Now what?" "Legs weights. 15 pound each also." "You have to be kidding," Naruto muttered as he dragged his feet forward trying to edge closer to the chamber. Zabuza looked at him, a small smirk on his face, the man was obviously enjoying Naruto's suffering. "I can barely move," Naruto grumbled loudly and Zabuza shrugged before he began to speak. "We have to get you back to normal and then some. Before we get in there I want to tell you some very important things, we don't have time to waste in there," Zabuza said, and Naruto stared at him with an angered expression. "Aren't we going to be in there for the equivalent of a year or so?" the blonde almost yelled. "How can we not have time?" he hissed, and Zabuza sighed and rubbed his forehead. "This chamber is powerful, probably the most powerful thing known to man. It is comparable to… I don't know. Just shut up and listen." Zabuza groaned and Naruto set his mouth in a thin line, his eyes narrowed as he glared at his uncle. "Damn it. The chamber can be used for a long time, but if we use it for a year, then it will seal itself after we leave for a year," Taka said quietly, but annoyance and anger laced her words. "That's why we don't have time to waste. Besides, there is something we have to do before we can even think about entering this chamber," Taka said and looked at Zabuza, who was staring at Naruto with a blank face. "What?" Naruto muttered, and Zabuza looked at the chamber before speaking. "We are going to train you to be strong, but there is something preventing you from doing that," Zabuza said, and Naruto waited for him to finish. The blonde stared at his uncle in apprehension. "The Kikbi, you have no chakra control because the seal that was placed on you allows the demon's chakra to be added to your own gradually, but the seal can't stop the random fluxes that flood our system. That is why you have no control. Your chakra frequency is always changing," Zabuza said, and Naruto stared at them for a little bit before laughing. "Tell me. How do you plan on fixing that? Releasing the Kikbi?" Naruto asked and laughed, wiping a tear from his eye. "Yes," Taka said with a flat voice. "That's exactly what we plan to do." On Hagakure, hospital. 7:34 a.m. I'll kill him. I'll find the worthless shit and do what the council should have done a year ago. Inoichi bellowed as he gripped the wall next to him tightly, leaving finger indents along with cracks in the wall. His eyes were trained on his daughter who was lying in a hospital bed, the blankets pulled up around her. She was hooked up to a few machines that took care of a few basic necessities, such as food and water, and also a drip. She had bandages wrapped around her arms, legs, and stomach. Her face had a few gauze pads strapped to it, and her breath was coming deeply. Inoichi, I know you are angered, but Kaheru began to say, but the angered man wasn't going to listen. Instead he took a different approach, one that left everyone in the room staring at the blonde man and the gray-haired man in shock, one that left the elder pinned against the wall, a hand on his throat, ready to choke the life out of him. Inoichi didn't take the approach of a calm clan head, instead he took the approach of a pissed-off father, a father that knew his daughter had just been raped and the sick bastard who did it was still out there. You know I'm angered. Oh, it's beyond that. The blonde man said, hissing the words at the elder. He knew there would most likely be punishment, but right now, for one of the few moments in his life, his judgment was clouded by emotion. I don't know what I am right now because I'm so fucking pissed that I think I may have created a new emotion that would make the anger of a bitch pale in comparison. Inoichi roared and pressed tighter against the gasping elder's throat. Inoichi, a concerned man, said and placed a hand on his friend's shoulder. He slightly pulled his friend, who ignored his touch for a few moments before he released the elder from his grasp, allowing the man to fall onto his ass and shuffle backwards before coming to a stand next to his opposite Hamura. I know you're angry, I am too, but we must think rationally. Dealing among ourselves will not solve our problems. Shikaku muttered as he let his eyes fall upon the elders. Then I suggest they leave before I express mail their souls to the god of their choice. No, scratch that, I'll sell their souls to the foulest demon that resides in the deepest pits of hell, and in return, I'll ask for a flaming rod of spiked metal that I can shove up their asses and gain a sliver of satisfaction. They'll know what it's like to be raped. Inoichi said darkly as he slowly turned his back on the elders. We are here to discuss important matters. Hamura said before the argument could escalate to a full-out battle within the small room. She looked at her colleague and dismissed his coughing into his sleeve. We have to consider our option right now. Capturing Sasuke is a priority. He must be put back under lock and key so that we can evaluate his mental condition. Hamura said and was cut off from saying anything more when a low chuckle resounded from the windowsill. All eyes turned and found themselves looking at none other than the legendary Sannin Jiraiya. What is the meaning of your interruption, Jiraiya? Should you not be reporting to the Hokage? Hamura asked in a flat tone, anger hidden well. Jiraiya looked around the room, amusement about what Hamura had stated before he made his appearance was apparent in his eyes. His glance moved over to the bedridden and comatose Ino. You say that Sasuke needs to be mentally evaluated. What better evaluation than looking at what the little brat has done? Jiraiya said and waved his hand at the elders. If he thinks it's just fine to kill and rape fellow shinobi, then you know something's not right in his pathetic head. If you don't like that argument, then how about this one? He ran off to go find Orochimaru. No, scratch that, he ran off with Orochimaru's elite guard and they brought him directly to Orochimaru. Jiraiya said with a dark scowl on his face. He still had no idea why his sensei kept the worthless advisors around because the only advice that they gave was shit. We do not know at this time as Sasuke has joined Orochimaru. For all we know, he could be trying to infiltrate his walls and then gather information on him for us. Kaheru said, his voice hoarse due to the fact that Inoichi nearly strangled him. Really? And part of his glorious mission was to rape a fellow comrade. Sounds like a great plan for a mentally unstable, traitorous and worthless bastard. He had the curse mark and we all know he is hell-bent on gaining power, so don't try to stick up in his defense. This village has lost its precious Uchiha. Jiraiya said and glanced at Ino sadly. And in the process we may have lost another gifted ninja, he muttered, only for a select few to hear. That is exactly why we are here. Hamura stated as she stepped forward and looked at the room's occupants with an air of authority, as though she was in control of them all. Inoichi, Shikaku, Isumi, who was Ino's mother, Sakura, Chimza, Jiraiya, and finally a frightened nurse who was trapped in a corner, fearfully watching everything happening. Hamura sniffed slightly before continuing. Sasuke did something horrible, but at the same time it may be a blessing. Ino. She could be pregnant with the boy's child if she gives birth then. Boom. I'll kill you both. Inoichi screamed as he dived out the doorway that he had thrown Hamura's frail body through. Kaheru was thrown to the side as the blonde man shouldered past him, his attention solely focused on the woman who made such a retarded plan. His teeth were bared and his hands outstretched, prepared to strangle the woman, but when his hands were inches from her neck, inches from showing her what he thought about the plan, he found his movements halted. He snarled, but he knew it was no use. Shikaku had him trapped in his Kage main jutsu. You fool. Homura screamed as she stood to her feet, shaking slightly. Blood ran from the top of her forehead and the side of her mouth. That brat could give birth to a glorious new clan, but you. I suggest you leave now. Jiraiya said menacingly as he walked out of the hospital room and into the hallway. He was glaring at Homura, and his gaze flickered slightly when Kaharu slipped past him and started to push Homura along. "Oh, it isn't worth it," he muttered, and the two disappeared around a corner farther down the hall. Jiraiya glared for a little bit before he turned. "Inoichi, you're going to be dealing with their hate for a while. They'll go out of their way to make your life hell," he said with a small chuckle, but Inoichi replied with a vicious retort, all his anger and fury aimed at the wrinkled elders. "How dare they suggest my daughter be a concubine?" he said and felt control of his body return to him. "I have half a mind to chase them down and finish them. Kami knows they have been causing enough problems for the council, I could end it and any threat to my daughter," the blonde father said through his teeth as he stormed back into the room through the doorway, which was missing a door now. "But you won't, right?" Jiraiya asked as he followed the man into the room. Inoichi was at his daughter's side, and Asumi wasted no time in wrapping her arm around her husband, melting into his side as she laid a hand on her daughter's leg gently, tears brimming in the blonde woman's eyes. "Want to know why? Because you want to be able to get the little fuck, so do I. The last thing I want is Orochimaru to get his hands on Sasuke, but let's face the facts, Orochimaru can keep himself and Sasuke hidden until the time that he takes the boy's body. If you want to have justice served, we have to get to Sasuke in the next 3 years," Jiraiya said, and Inoichi looked at him, a look of grim understanding in his eyes. "How long will it take us to find them?" he asked, his tone of voice made many shiver. This wasn't just a man going after a traitor, this was a father. A true father that was going to bring to justice the one who harmed his daughter. "Forever," Jiraiya said with a scowl. "That snake can hide when he wants, in fact if we go to find him there is someone we need to find first," Jiraiya said grimly and looked around the room, his eyes briefly settling on Sakura before they returned to Inoichi who was staring at him, his eyes dull and blank. "There is only one other person besides you that hates Sasuke with a passion, only one other person that would hunt the boy down for what he has done to Ino," Jiraiya said, and Sakura couldn't help but speak up. "Shikamaru?" she asked, and Jiraiya laughed and waved his hand. "Not the lazy Nara," the hermit muttered and looked at Sakura. "The person we have to try to find left a while before Sasuke. We have to find one Uzumaki Naruto," Jiraiya said, and the room seemed to freeze over. "He will be the one to end the Uchiha." "When do we leave to find him?" Inoichi asked after a few minutes of silence. His resolve was strong, he wouldn't back down. He couldn't be kept in the village since he retired a few years ago, and he could leave Asumi with the clan head responsibilities while he was gone. "The day if you want, I have a feeling that Naruto won't be too happy. In fact, I think we will find Sasuke rather quick," Jiraiya said darkly before turning away from those in the room and walked towards the window. "I'm going to notify the Hokage that we are going to attempt to find the boy who ran one more time." With that, Jiraiya leaped out of the open window and disappeared from sight. "Naruto?" Sakura thought as she stared at the window that the man had just jumped out the window. "It's been so long," she thought, and then her gaze flickered over to her best friend, her comatose best friend. "Please Naruto," she thought as a tear formed. "Please kill that worthless bastard." Izugakure, hidden chamber. 8:46 p.m. "No way." Naruto growled as he took a challenging step backwards, his feet dragging as he tried to put at least a small amount of distance between himself and Taka and Zabuza. "I've held the fox back for," Naruto trailed off as he tried to think about how old he was now. "I was 13 when I graduated, 14 at the Chunin exams. A year past 15 years, I don't think I want to chance letting it go now." "All for what?" Naruto said as he tried to throw his hands in the air in a surprised gesture, but he found the weights to be like anchors, only allowing him to raise them a few inches before they dropped back to his sides. "Damn weights, damn Zabuza. Damn fox," Naruto growled mentally. "All for chakra control," Taka said with a scowl on her face. She had already explained the whole thing to the boy, but trying to get things through to him was harder than getting a Wagakure to forgive the Yondaime. "I told you what we must do. If we can pull this off, then you'll no longer have to deal with the Kikbi's influence, and you'll be able to control your chakra," Taka said, and Zabuza nodded beside her in agreement. "The chances of failure are high. But I know that you can do it, especially if I lend my strength," his uncle said as he crossed his arms in front of his chest, expecting Naruto to get the bigger picture. The blonde boy just continued to scowl at both older ninja though, making Zabuza sigh in frustration. "Listen here," Zabuza said darkly and took a step forward towards Naruto. "You're going to be the leader of this village, right? Sometimes it takes sacrifices, daring chances, and loss in order to keep your people alive. Do you want to be a chicken shit and let your people die because you were afraid to face your demon? You held it back for 15 years, you say?" Zabuza asked, and Naruto glared at him before nodding sharply. Then prove who the master is. If you can hold back the strongest Bijk, then I'm sure you can hold it back for a few minutes so we can place the new seal. Zabuza said and looked at his nephew sternly. You have to do this, if not for yourself then do it for those close to you. The man said and that was the end of it, only silence followed afterwards. In this silence Taka stared at the blonde boy, her contempt and disgust with him very obvious, if not for some unknown reason. Zabuza began to second-guess his judgment of the blonde, he had thought the boy was brave, but now he was having other thoughts. Naruto was staring at the ground in anger, shame, and fear. He had already wasted a year of his life battling one demon, now he had to face the other demon, the one that was most likely stronger than Shai. The blonde clenched his fists together as he tried to clarify his thoughts, tried to dive through the jumbled emotions and get to the center of his heart, the place where the answer would lie. Tell me exactly what has to happen. I don't want a half-assed version of what we need to do. Naruto said as he brought his gaze up, his eyes were cold and serious. The normally soft and warm blue eyes were so fierce now, so deadly that Zabuza had a hard time believing that this was the same Naruto standing before him. Taka let a small smirk cross her face before she shook her head, tossing her blue hair out of her face. The seal placed on you now, it's weak and will probably break within the next 4 years. It's a very complex seal, very difficult to understand and replicate. I have a newfound respect for the Yondaime for making something such as this at the last moment nonetheless. The purpose of this seal is to bind the Kyuubi to you until you release it or you die, and throughout your life, the seal will slowly allow the Kyuubi's chakra to filter into your system and join your own. Because of that, your chakra is always spiking randomly and you have horrible chakra control. Taka explained and crossed her arms in front of her chest and sighed. Now, Zabuza found me fairly early and requested that I begin working on a new seal, one that put this one here to shame. As your uncle said earlier, the Uzumaki were seal masters, the Yondaime would be considered an amateur compared to some of our kinsmen. But, forgetting history, our clan created one of the most powerful seals, a seal that was usually always used to contain demons. The Uzumaki created the Jinchuriki seal. Taka said and Naruto's serious eyes wavered for a brief second and he opened his mouth slightly before he clenched his fists. What do you mean? He asked in a hard whisper, his eyes boring into Taka as though they were searching her soul. What I mean is the Uzumaki created a seal, very powerful indeed, that could seal any of the Bijk within someone. Only thing is that person didn't receive the demon's chakra, any benefits, they didn't even know they were there actually. But the most important difference between theirs and yours was that the demon would break free when its jailer died. The Uzumaki didn't want to give so much power to one person and so they literally locked the demons away when they were sealed, but over time people were able to adjust the seal, technically they ruined it. Taka muttered and trailed off and looked at Naruto with a peculiar interest. But anyways, the seal that I am going to place on you, unless the Kyuubi manages to break free. Taka said as a side note and ignored the growl that came from Naruto's throat. The seal is a combination of the Uzumaki's seal and your own seal. It took long to perfect it, very dangerous also since I had to enter your containment cell in order to observe it. Taka said and Naruto gestured for her to continue. This bitch gets sidetracked easily. He thought with a mental sigh. Alright, this new seal can only be placed if we destroy the seal you have in place. As you already know, when that seal is removed the Kyuubi has a straight shot to freedom, only there is one thing that can stop it. That's you. You can't beat the fox, not at your strength now, maybe later in life but not now. All you have to do is hold it back for 20 minutes, that's it. I'll start working on the new seal as soon as you pull the old seal off. When I finish the seal we'll drag the Kyuubi back to its cage, or whatever thing binds the demon. Taka said and finished her face blank and her eyes focused completely on the blonde in front of her. And what does this new seal do? Naruto asked with a tired sigh. So far it sounded like he would have his hands full. Taka chuckled, a chuckle that was devoid of any emotion. The new seal will take the Kyuubi with you when you die. The most important things it will do though, first it will completely restrict Kyuubi's chakra from entering your own system. If you had this seal in the first place this would be dangerous because if Kyuubi's chakra had somehow entered your system then you would be ripped apart. Taka said joyfully, enjoying the fact that Naruto was starting to get slightly worried. But now that you've had Kyuubi's chakra running through your system for 15 years your body is used to it. Of course I recommend that you train using the demon's chakra also so that you don't kill yourself from non-use and then you suddenly use it one day and anyways. Since the Kyuubi's chakra will be trapped within the seal you will be able to use your own chakra, control it and everything. Since you won't have to worry about Kyuubi's random chakra intrusions and small doses being added to your system, you will maintain a constant chakra frequency, which means you can finally get rather good chakra control. You'll still be able to communicate with the demon and use his chakra, not even the strongest seal can force the demon to willingly give its chakra to you, siphon it slowly yes, and absorb it all no. You'll still have your crazy amount of chakra as it is, surprisingly the Kyuubi had little to do with that. You were born with rather large chakra coils, and the Kyuubis made them slightly bigger, and now you might lose maybe a small amount of your total amount, but if my judgment is correct, you still have the same amount if not more than a Hokage. Your stamina is all on you, you'll still have that. Your regeneration, the crazy ability you have to heal within a few minutes, I think that will remain, because with every seal the demon within has a chance to escape, and the Kyuubi will hope for freedom still one day. The final side effect that you will have is Taka trailed off and gave him a small smirk. You won't have a berserker mode when you get angry anymore. Naruto was staring at the ground as he absorbed all of the information given to him. This new seal was only an upgrade that came at the cost of him releasing the most powerful bitch upon the world. Okay, let's do this. We are doing it right now, right? He asked and looked at his uncle who was nodding. Yeah, we won't be able to do it in the chamber, even though it would trap the Kyuubi for a couple weeks if it escaped. We can't use chakra in there, and so it will be impossible to make a good seal. Zabuza muttered, and Naruto tapped his chin and thought for a second. How are you going to help me? Naruto asked. He remembered Zabuza saying her would help him when it came time for him to hold the demon back. I'm going to fight by your side. Hopefully you won't be as weak on the inside as you are out here. Zabuza said and looked towards Taka, who was kneeling on the ground waiting for the two to give the go-ahead. Let's get started now. I wants to get in the chamber as soon as possible. Naruto nodded and hesitantly kneeled in front of Taka. The woman sighed before grabbing his shoulder and in a display of great strength, slammed him painfully into the ground so that he was lying in front of her. Oh sorry I forgot, she muttered with a grin. I need you to take off your shit. I need to work with the seal, so she said, and Naruto sighed before he pushed himself up and pulled the orange t-shirt off and laid it behind his head, and as he started to lower himself down, Taka sighed impatiently. Ouch. Naruto yelled and glared at Taka, who had slammed him down into the ground again. The woman rolled her eyes and watched as Zabuza knelt down on the other side of Naruto. Are we ready? He asked and both ninja nodded once. Naruto closed his eyes, and before he entered his mental state he felt Zabuza's hand laid upon on his forehead. Hey fur coat. Naruto yelled as he drew close to the cage. He looked down at his body before he got any closer, and he was shocked to find that he was wearing his training outfit, which included his weights. The only thing that really changed was the fact that he was able to move with the weights on. Naruto flexed his muscles and was slightly shocked to find that they were much bigger than they were in the real world. Zabuza's wish came true somehow. I have my old strength back in here. Hey, why complain? You there, fox? Naruto yelled again and waited. Silence followed though. What do you want, mortal? Kyuubi asked in its tone of hatred. Naruto watched as slowly Kyuubi repeated the same routine it repeated every time he came to see it. The fox slowly opened its eyes, its red pupils staring at Naruto with hatred and contempt. Why have you disturbed me? The fox growled and Naruto laughed and drew closer to the cage, water splashing around his ankles as he walked. Well, you see, in order to get stronger I got to get a new seal. Naruto said with a shrug. He couldn't show his fear to the fox lest the demon prey upon it, let the emotion give it strength. So I say we strike a deal. I beat you and you stop being an asshole to me and give me something I can use in a fight. All other Jinchuriki have something. Naruto said and stopped in front of the cage. Kyuubi watched him with anger, its eyes hovering mysteriously in the dark. You think I want to treat you with kindness? The fox barked and began to chuckle darkly, its laughter rumbling throughout the room. No deal. I only tolerated you back in your battle with the Gobi to ensure my survival. The same applies to your fight with Shai. Why would I help you anymore? I give you the arrest means to survive and keep me alive. The Kyuubi growled and Naruto shrugged and grinned at the fox. I guess you don't want a chance at freedom. Naruto said, and the fox's eyes flashed, and slowly the beast's entire head came into view. The wicked grin that the fox had on its face made Naruto slightly shudder. Are you interested now? Naruto asked and the fox laughed, ignoring Naruto. I see I've been sleeping for too long. Kyuubi roared and Naruto felt his hair shift slightly as the beast glared at him. I'll accept your deal. I'll give you a great power if you release me and manage to defeat me, the Kyuubi said, and watched with satisfaction as the seal that kept the cage it was locked and closed slowly began to lower down to Naruto's level. Naruto placed his hand at the top of the seal and stared at it for a little bit, making up his mind. Remember the last time we were in this position? I tricked you, that made me laugh so hard, Naruto whispered, and with a great feat of mental, physical, and emotional strength he ripped the seal off that was holding the Kyuubi back and jumped backwards, far away from the cage. Now you die, mortal. The Kyuubi roared and threw itself at the cage and at Naruto. Now you die, mortal. The Kyuubi roared and threw itself at the cage and at Naruto. Its fangs were bared, saliva dripping from its eager mouth. The fox's eyes were wide with gleeful bloodlust, the red seemed to shine brightly. The Kyuubi slammed into the cage with its shoulder, causing the entire room to shake, and the metal bars to swing open and slam into the walls where they melted and became nothing. Naruto stared at the giant fox in awe, a fearful awe. The Kyuubi emerged from the cage in a crouch, prepared to pounce on the blonde and get revenge for its imprisonment for the least 15 years. The beast was huge compared to Naruto and seemed like the room they were in expanded and warped until they were surrounded by white wall. The water that had originally been there was gone and in its place was a white marble floor. Naruto took a step back as he stared at the demon, its orange fur rippled, its white claws dug into the ground and the fox snarled at Naruto. "I've waited for this day for 15 years, the day that I would be able to rip you apart." The Kyuubi roared and raised its giant paw and brought it down on Naruto. It whistled as it flew through the air and Naruto felt the wind under the paw push downwards, forcing him to cover his face with both arms to protect his face. "Don't just stand there." He heard a voice scream and then before he could respond he was hit hard from the side and he and whatever hit him went rolling to the right just in time to dodge the Kyuubi's claw that slammed into the ground where he had once stood, destroying the marble. Naruto coughed as he opened his eyes and looked around, slightly confused as to what was going on. As he looked around his gaze fell upon his uncle who was crouched and staring at the giant fox, his sword drawn and held out to his left with one hand while his right was down on the ground supporting him so he could jump anyway faster. "Thanks," Naruto muttered as he got to his feet and stood behind Zabuza in a loose fighting style, ready to dodge any more attacks that the Kyuubi might try to use. "So tell me," Naruto said as he watched the Kyuubi swivel its head and glare at both of the Uzumaki. "How are we going to beat it?" Naruto asked and Zabuza snorted and jumped high in the air, but not before answering Naruto. "We're not." He roared and started making hand seals quickly. He landed on the serpent seal and bellowed as the marble floor began to crack and mist began to seep upward from the marble. The mist spread across the ground and began to rise steadily until it submerged the lower half of the room. Naruto cursed as his vision was obscured, he hadn't used the mist technique for what seemed like forever and he wasn't prepared to fight a giant demon in it right now. "We just have to hold him back for 20 minutes, remember?" Zabuza whispered behind him suddenly and Naruto slightly stiffened out of shock. The man was a master at using this technique and of course he could sneak up behind Naruto in his own mindscape. "I was only able to obscure the lower half of the room, but that gives us an advantage. The Kyuubi is high above the mist, the only thing that is blocked from view are his claws and lower legs and body, but most importantly us." Zabuza finished and Naruto nodded, not knowing if the man could sense that he had just done so. "How long have we been in here since I released the Kyuubi?" Naruto asked in a hushed voice. He felt the ground shake as the Kyuubi roared furiously and slammed a clawed hand down looking for them. 2 minutes, this mist might keep us from his view for maybe 5 minutes, Zabuza muttered and grabbed Naruto and ran, in which direction Naruto wasn't sure, but he knew that it was away from the demon. "Face me, you worthless scum. My teeth need cleansing and your blood will make them gleam." Kyuubi roared and Naruto wasn't able to see it, but the beast raised its right arm and swung it diagonally, scattering the mist. What Naruto did know is that he and Zabuza were sent hurtling towards the ground and the mist around them swirled wildly before it was blown away, revealing their position. Or it might not last at all. Zabuza roared as he rolled to his feet and ran towards the Kyuubi. The fox snarled and brought his claw down on the man, or at least tried to. Zabuza, seeing the threat, jumped backwards, narrowly avoiding the claw that slammed into the ground, making it shake. The man teetered for a second before he dived forward and landed on the fox's claw and stabbed his sword into Kyuubi's claw, all the way up to the hilt. "Hh." The Kyuubi roared in agony and lifted its paw and brought it to its mouth, ready to eat Zabuza alive. Naruto watched as Zabuza quickly began making hand seals again, and as the demon's jaws opened wide, its teeth gleaming, a funnel of water formed behind Zabuza and exploded outwards, straight into Kyuubi's mouth and down its throat, doing a good amount of damage. "Suiton. Daibakufu no Jutsu." The man roared the technique's name as he grabbed the hilt of his sword and ripped it free of the demon's paw and dived forward and spun in midair until he came down on the Kyuubi's, now closed, snout and landed on its nose. Zabuza proceeded to raise his sword high and was about to slam it into the demon's nose, but the Kyuubi growled darkly and flicked its claw, which was already near its face, at Zabuza and managed to hit the man that was annoying it. "Shit. Zabuza." Naruto roared as the man flew towards the ground at speeds that would make Guy jealous. Naruto could only watch as Zabuza smashed into the ground, destroying the marble beneath him and creating a crater filled with destroyed rock. Naruto dashed forward, watching the Kyuubi out of the corner of his eye. The demon was licking its injured claw and glaring at the blonde, blood dripping from its wounded mouth, which would most likely heal within the next few seconds. Naruto drew close to his injured uncle and fell to his knees, sliding across the marble and to the edge of the crater. "Are you dead down there?" Naruto asked with a shaky voice, and he heard a groan of protest. He watched as Zabuza pushed a large chunk of marble off himself and slowly rolled over and got on one knee. Blood was pouring from deep gouges on his chest and arms, a splinter or stake of marble was speared through his calf, and his sword was embedded deep within the rock. "I'm done, kid, he might actually kill me in here," Zabuza said, and coughed up some blood and gave Naruto a thumb up. "I wasted 5 minutes though, you just got to hold him back for 11 more, got it?" Zabuza said. His body faded from view, followed shortly by his sword. Naruto groaned as he turned back to the giant demon that was grinning at him like the fox it was. "I fucking hate you." Naruto growled and the Kyuubi chuckled darkly. "I think I will toy with you and enjoy your anguished cries and pleas for mercy." Kyuubi roared and reared its head back, and a ball of fire began to form in front of the demon's mouth, fueled by a steady flame that seemed to stream from the back of the demon's throat. As the Kyuubi prepared its attack, Naruto stared at the demon in pure shock. "The rat bastard doesn't know," Naruto thought with glee as he got ready to dodge the attack. "Too bad I'll die despite that fact. I know exactly what attack he's about to use." Naruto finished with a sad look. He had watched the Kyuubi turn a bijk entirely into glass with the attack it was about to use. The giant ball of flaming destruction would make short work of the blonde. "Worry not, my son." Naruto stiffened as he heard the voice and stared at the Kyuubi in horror as the demon shot its head forward, launching a large fireball at Naruto's frozen form. A grin was wide on Kyuubi's face as he saw Naruto's horror-struck face and could sense the despair and fear radiating from the boy. "Onikaten. Nagirabashi. Still being a nuisance, I see, Kyuubi," a soft feminine voice said, and as soon as the last word was said, a woman appeared in front of Naruto and raised her palm, catching the giant ball of flames. The Kyuubi roared in anger as its attack was halted from destroying its target, and Naruto was assisted by yet another person. "Can I ask you for a few moments of Naruto's time?" the woman asked, and the Kyuubi response was to jump at her, claws outstretched, prepared to rip her to shreds. "I see," she muttered and lowered her head sorrowfully. "What the hell?" Naruto muttered. "Sit, you worthless fucking excuse of a fox." The women screamed and black chains erupted from the walls, floor, and ceiling and impaled Kyuubi's body, holding it in place. "We'll be right back," she said and turned towards Naruto and smiled. "Won't we?" Hanahagakure, Hokage office. 10:01 a.m. "That's a very funny joke, Jiraiya. Now why are you here?" the Hokage asked as he stared at his student with a serious and weary look. His hands were clasped together in front of his face, his elbows on the desk he was sitting at. Jiraiya stood in front of him, as hands crossed in front of him, a somewhat impatient look on his face. "Sarutobi-sensei," Jiraiya muttered and chuckled. "You know I'm as serious as I can be in this situation. We know Orochimaru wants to take over Sasuke's body, and his last body exchange was shortly after the Chunin exams, which means," Jiraiya trailed off, the unsaid ending hanging in the air where the Hokage snatched it and said it. "We have 2 years left to stop him before he gets his hands on the Sharingan." The Hokage muttered, and he let a tired sigh escape his lungs, and he closed his eyes. "Jiraiya, I'm ashamed to say it, but some of our best ninja have already searched for Naruto, and none have found him. I even have heard rumors that Kakashi has looked for the boy," the Hokage muttered, and Jiraiya shrugged, his eyes closing, and his face one of boredom. I think I have a good idea of where to look. The boy is a Suiton user, right? There are only a few places he could go that he would go. We know that he's traveling too with Momoichi's Zabuza also, so that limits that places even more," Jiraiya said and rubbed his left eye and yawned. "And if he isn't working on his water jutsu, then he's bound to be in the land on iron, mastering his kinjutsu and learning a shitload more," Jiraiya said, and the Hokage nodded, thinking about the information that Jiraiya had just presented. The old man let out a sigh as he realized he was getting into a mess that was sure to give him a headache that put all others to glorious shame. "Let's say you're right. Let's say Naruto is in one of these other villages. What makes you sure that other ninja from our village haven't already checked these places out?" the Hokage asked, and Jiraiya chuckled lightly. The white-haired Sannin looked at his sensei with a look of disbelief and laughed a bit louder. "You're an old fool, sensei," Jiraiya accused and slapped his forehead, punishing himself for holding his sensei in such high regard. This is the boy who painted the entire Hokage monument without ninja noticing him, ran from Genin, Chunin, Junin, and even Anbu sometimes and was never caught, the boy who was able to sneak into the Hokage's house and steal the forbidden scroll of secrets. Jiraiya bellowed, and the Hokage sighed as he realized where this was going. "What makes you think he couldn't hide from some stupid ninja out for his head?" Jiraiya asked, all his playfulness gone suddenly, replaced by coldness. "I guess you're right, but still, even if I gave you the go-ahead, I must confer with the council," the Hokage muttered, and Jiraiya snorted. "Then let us go. I wish to leave later today if possible, the sooner we get rid of Sasuke the better," Jiraiya said and turned on his heel and walked from the office, the exasperated Hokage behind him. Hanahagakure, council chambers. 10:58 a.m. What an outrageous claim. You called us here for that? A civilian council member cried in outrage, his face flushed as he found out that he was called in for a sudden meeting for Jiraiya's request. The Sannin was standing in the middle of the chambers, the clan heads, minus Inoichi who stood next to him, were on his right, the civilian council was to his left, and straight in front of him was the Hokage, Kaheru, and Homura. "Sensei, why is the civilian council here again?" Jiraiya asked with a bored look. He reached up with his right hand, and with a sigh he scratched the inside of his ear with his pinky, ignoring the civilian who shouted. "They like to complicate things for us." He muttered and Inoichi grunted in agreement. "This is a matter that affects us all. If we go on with your request then the civilians will lose someone akin to a role model to them. Everyone in this village loves the Uchiha." Dansum said as he stared at Jiraiya with his single eye, his voice was emotionless, his face completely blank. It almost made him seem as though he wasn't biased to the whole situation. "Ah, role model my ass," Jiraiya said and crossed his arms and pointed at a random civilian, a woman with shoulder-length brown hair. "You want your son to look up to a rapist?" he asked and turned to the man next to him. "And do you want your daughter to hang out with a boy who looks up to a rapist and will follow in his footsteps?" He asked and watched as the two civilians' mouths opened and closed and remained that way. "Back to your request." Homura snapped, her eyes boring into Inoichi's as she spoke. "We will not allow you to leave. We will organize special teams to retrieve Uchiha Sasuke, we won't waste your time in finding him," she said and Jiraiya chuckled lightly and looked at Inoichi. "They won't waste my time, eh?" he said and Inoichi chuckled darkly in response. "Woman, I got nothing but time for a traitorous rapist." Jiraiya roared at Homura and she promptly sniffed and raised her chin, as though she was dismissing Jiraiya's statement as nothing more than trash. "Besides, like I already stated," the white-haired man said and looked at his sensei who was looking at Jiraiya with a glazed look showing that he was slightly detached from the proceedings. "We are also going to find Naruto and have him help us," Jiraiya said and his statement caught the attention of a few people gathered in the room. "Going to snare the fox, eh? About time we went after him," a fat civilian said and chuckled, his laugh making Jiraiya scowl. "Been nothing but trouble, what, with his accusations against Sasuke and others?" the man exclaimed and began coughing into his sleeve from laughing. "What do you propose to do with Naruto when you find him, may I ask?" Homura asked with distaste, the name making bile rise in her throat, or it seemed that way. "Bring him back to the village. He won't last a day within these walls before he is torn apart," she said matter-of-factly. "Oh no," Inoichi exclaimed, speaking up for the first time. "We plan to ask for his help in fighting Sasuke. If you remember correctly, Orochimaru has an elite guard in Kabuto, me and Jiraiya will have to fight against them as it is. We are going to ask Naruto to finish what he started back at the Chunin exams and also before he left," Inoichi said, and after he finished speaking he heard several cries of disbelief and protest. "Silence," the Hokage said with a sigh, his hand resting on the side of his face as he looked at Jiraiya. He had already heard the proposal, but he had to still act businesslike and get answers for everyone who didn't know already. "What do you plan to do with Naruto after you finish with Orochimaru and Sasuke?" the Hokage asked curiously. Jiraiya had never told him about what happens now. "We go our separate ways," Jiraiya said with a shrug. "I doubt he wants to come back, he has stayed away for a year and I don't think I have the strength to kill my student who has done nothing wrong," Jiraiya said and looked towards Inoichi who was nodding in agreement, his face still dark and his eyes focused on Homura. "I won't raise a hand against the boy either. If he fights for my daughter then he hasn't done anything wrong to me, he treated her with respect while he was here and so I can only assume that he isn't hell-bent on destroying our village, so he can't be a real threat." Inoichi spoke and someone cleared their throat commanding the attention of several people. "I agree with Inoichi, Naruto doesn't seem like the type to try to destroy his home village. The only thing that concerns me is that another village may get their hands on him and due to what he holds," Dansum said, letting the rest of the sentence hang in the air, letting everyone else make their own assumptions. "I say you guys go and search for both Naruto and Sasuke and bring them back in." Yuzukatsume growled from her spot, getting the attention of everyone. No one from the clan side had spoken up in the matter, but now it seemed as though they were offering their input. "I know Naruto can be a little fierce, he reminds me of my clansman. He is loyal or was until we messed up, but still he has had a year to get revenge on us, and honestly," Tsume said, and with a throaty chuckle that sounded more like a growl. "We all know that he jumps into things without giving much thought on the matter," she said and she heard a few people laugh and agree with her. "If he was going to get his revenge he would have done it by now. Besides there are people in this village who he still loves, so I doubt that he will try to destroy us. Sasuke on the other hand, he needs to be killed or placed in the most secure prison that we can offer. I say we lock him in the basement of a clan compound like the Hikages." Tsume finished with a growl, and many people looked at her curiously, and then their attention shifted to Hiashi to see what he would say. I must ask, Tsume, why do you propose that he be locked within my compound's basement? Hiashi asked, raising an eyebrow. Cause you guys wouldn't waste time poking that bastard in the heart and ending his existence. Don't try to say you guys don't hate the Uchiha. Tsume said and grinned at Hiashi. Unless you have some positive feelings towards Sasuke. She asked, and Hiashi's face, which was already blank, seemed to become even blanker, almost pale at the thought of liking Sasuke. No, I do not. He muttered, and Tsume laughed at his expression. Neither do I. But I must ask, why do we feel the need to unleash Uzumaki Naruto upon the boy? Does he deserve such punishment? Aburami Shiba asked in his emotionless and calculating tone. Many people were shocked to hear the man speak up, but Jiraiya wasted no time in answering his question. Okay, we don't have enough time to answer every question in existence right now, no offense to you Shiba, since you bring up a good point. Bottom line is this. Jiraiya said and looked at everyone. Sasuke went to Orochimaru, who is going to take his body and acquire the Sharingan. I want one person in here to try and tell me that Sasuke can beat Orochimaru. Jiraiya challenged, and he heard no one try to defend the Uchiha boy, and so he continued. You guys think Sasuke is strong, and the Sharingan is the village's most powerful weapon. Imagine what happens when the man that hates our village more than the Kikbi does, acquired. We are dead. Bottom line. Jiraiya said, and he saw many pale and heard many gasps. Are you sure about this? Shikaku asked, and Jiraiya chuckled. Yes, Orochimaru wants that, he said as much a year ago, which reminds me, he will take Sasuke's body in 2 years. We have never been able to find and capture Orochimaru in the last 20 years, so what makes us think we can do it in these next 2? Here's what. A blonde who never gives up, a father who wants revenge, and me who wants to rid this earth of a traitorous teammate. That's why we release Naruto upon Sasuke. He won't give up, especially when he hears about what the brat did to Ino. Jiraiya said, and he saw a few nods on the civilian side, surprisingly, and all of the clan heads nodded. Okay Jiraiya, your request sounds reasonable. But Inoichi, if you leave, who will take your place? The Hokage asked warily, already dreading the answer. Asumi. Inoichi spoke, and many people paled. No, not again. A civilian whispered in horror, a hand unconsciously reaching up and touching his cheek where he had been hit by a frying pan by the blonde woman. Alright, you may try to find Naruto and Sasuke, but I warn you. The Hokage said, and Jiraiya beeped his head at him. If I get any complaints from another village when Naruto goes berserk, it's coming out of your hide. Am I clear? The Hokage demanded. Hi. Jiraiya said with an amused expression. Hi. Inoichi said darkly. Who knows if Naruto will even be able to get a piece of Sasuke when the time comes. The man thought as he pictured himself tearing into the raven-haired teen. Soon you will be avenged. Who are you? Naruto whispered and looked around wildly. The sound of Kikbi's growls were gone, and in fact everything was gone. There was nothing but pure white now, no walls, no floor, nor was there a ceiling. Naruto looked back towards the women and took in her features carefully, trying to see if he recognized her. Red hair that hung down past her shoulders, down to her lower back, and looked silky soft. She wore a red dress that was tied around her waist with a black belt, and her eyes were a deep green. She looked to be in her 20s, not much older than Zabuza in fact. Where are we? He whispered, and the woman giggled into her hand that she brought up to her mouth. Naruto, she said, and beeped her head at him. You don't know who I am? She asked in a playful tone and took a step towards him, and he took a step back. The woman paused, a hurt look crossing her face for a second before she sighed. I guess you wouldn't know, she whispered sadly. She looked at Naruto, her eyes piercing his, and Naruto froze, a warm feeling flooding through him. He had seen those eyes before, sometime in the past those eyes had looked upon him with the same kindness. Naruto took a hesitant step forward, and he felt the warmth grow, and soon in his mind a picture began to form. The woman holding him and smiling, but he only saw her green eyes. Are you recognizing me now? She asked in a hopeful tone. I've seen you before in my past, he whispered, and took another step forward so that they were only a few feet apart. A face appeared in his mind, and he saw himself, small, swaddled in blankets, his small arms waving. No, he whispered as a word began to form in his mind. It can't be. You're dead. He said and froze, but the warmth stayed within him, still touched every part of his body and beckoned him forward. Yes, Naruto, I'm your mother. Kushina said as she smiled at her son. She swooped forward and wrapped her arms around Naruto's stiff form, making the boy stare over her shoulder at the white nothingness in shock. Mother? He asked as tears formed in the corner of his eyes. Kushina laughed and took a step back, her hands on his shoulders still. He was the same height as her, maybe a bit taller, but still she held him as though he was smaller than her. She smiled brightly at him, showing her pearly white teeth. The one and only. She said and stepped back and placed her hands behind her back nervously. So I see you're fighting the Kikbi, eh? She asked and Naruto nodded slowly before he shook his head. How are you here? He asked as he wiped away at his tears furiously, trying to hide his embarrassment. How long? He asked and Kushina shrugged and looked at her imaginary watch, making her son laugh slightly. I don't know, an hour, a year, forever. She muttered and raised her hands. I guess for a while she said, and Naruto nodded and looked away hesitantly. What is it? She asked and he shook his head sadly and stared at her. I wish you had come maybe 5 or 6 minutes ago, he muttered, and she stared at him curiously, her green eyes shining. Why's that? She asked and Naruto hesitated before he answered his mother. Zabuza was here fighting the Kikbi with me. He said and he watched Kushina stiffened at the mention of her brother. She stared at Naruto in disbelief and brought her right hand up and rested it on her heart. Zabi-chan was, she whispered and tears formed in her eyes. I thought he was dead. She whispered and wiped her tears away as they began to flow. Oh well, I guess if you snooze you lose. She said half-heartedly and Naruto shook his head. I can tell him anything you might want to say. But first, I want to be selfish. The blonde boy said with a chuckle and ran forward and hugged his mother tightly again, enjoying her embrace as she wrapped her arms around him. How did you die? Naruto sobbed into her shoulder and Kushina brought a hand up and stroked his head softly, trying to ease his pain. When the Kikbi attacked you had to become the host for the demon. I was there when Kikbi was being sealed, watching over you. I was prepared to grab you after the demon was sealed but something happened. Before the Kikbi was entirely sealed away he tried to kill you, he came so close but I threw myself in front of the fox's attack and Kami smiled upon me that day. I was able to deflect the attack but in the process I died and was caught in the crossfire of the ceiling and was also sealed away. Kushina whispered into his hair as she kept rubbing it affectionately. Thank you, Naruto whispered as tears continued to soak her shoulder. He had never been able to cry on someone's shoulder like this. He finally had the chance to do so with his mother. My life has sucked but Zabuza he helped me. Naruto whispered and pulled away from his mother's shoulder and wiped his tears away with the back of his right hand. He better be. Kushina said with a small laugh and wiped her own tears away. Naruto, you ask how much time I had here? I lied, I only have a small amount of time and in that time I want to tell you some things. Kushina said and Naruto nodded and followed his mom's lead as she sat down on the white floor that really didn't exist. What is it? Naruto asked and Kushina laughed and looked at him. I fear that you'll have to fight a demon within yourself one day, it's powerful but Kushina began, but she was interrupted by Naruto's sudden laughter. What's so funny? She yelled and was about to punch Naruto when he slowly began to stop laughing until he was able to speak again. I already fought that demon. His name was Shai, and he explained everything to me. You were one of the only 2 female Uzumaki to beat their demon. Naruto exclaimed, and his mom smiled as he started talking about how cool that was. Naruto, we don't have much time. She said and patted him on the shoulder. I know it's awesome, but it's even cooler that you were the first and only male to ever beat his inner demon. Now, when you beat your demon, did it offer you power? Did you absorb it? Kushina asked and Naruto shrugged. Nah, I got something cooler instead, but I don't want to take it out, it's a big secret. Naruto said and stared at the ground for a bit. Really? Kushina asked curiously, and Naruto laughed. Nah. He exclaimed and jumped to his feet. He held his hand out and waited for Ranjin to appear but it didn't. He stared at his open palm, as did his mother, with confusion. Okay, never mind, it didn't work. He muttered and sat down. What was supposed to happen? I can see the markings on your hand and everything, but Kushina muttered as she stared at her son's palm. Her green eyes tried to figure it out but she couldn't come up with an answer. I got a sword, pretty awesome sword. The Ranjin. It chose me for some reason and then I absorbed Shai into the sword. Naruto said as he sat down and Kushina stared at him, mouth slightly open in shock. The woman shook her head in disbelief and put her fingers on her forehead as she laughed lightly. Well, then I guess I can move on to the next thing. If you've been with Zabuza then you know about your heritage and title. She asked and after Naruto nodded she continued. Okay, well the final 2 things that I need to tell you are these. First off, do you know that our clan has a bloodline? Kushina asked and watched as Naruto stiffened and stared at her in shock. What? He exclaimed, a look of pure shock crossing his face. Kushina chuckled lightly at his expression and nodded. Yes, we have the ability to use Ranten Jutsu, the storm release bloodline. Very powerful, but hard to control. I'd give you a huge lesson on it and tell you to be careful and everything, but Zabuza should know where the clan scrolls are. I want you to read everything. She said seriously and Naruto nodded, allowing her to continue. Second, I want to ask you a huge favor. Tell Zabuza, tell him that I love him and that I forgive him. I know he never meant what he said and that it didn't burden me when I died and I regret saying anything I ever said to him. If he doesn't believe you, tell him that I said I love you, Zabi-chan. Try not to cut your head off with your stupid sword," Kushina said with a chuckle, and Naruto laughed. Actually, he's a part of the Seven Swordsmen, or well, he used to be until a bunch of drama happened. Then we met up and here we go," Naruto said with a chuckle and laid back and stared at the nothingness. "I have so much to tell and ask you where I should start, I don't know," Naruto muttered. Kushina smiled at her son and was about to shift her feet when she found that they were unresponsive. The woman looked down and her heart broke when she saw that her legs were transparent and were fading. "Naruto," she whispered. "Oh, I should tell you about what I was able to do. I was able to master the Yondai Maze technique in 22 days. The Rasengan, it was so awesome," Naruto said and sat up and looked at his mom. "What's up?" he asked, and the woman stared at him in shock before her face turned to one of sorrow, her head nodded down towards her legs. "It's time," she whispered, and Naruto looked down and saw that her legs were disappearing, the transparency was spreading upwards. "But I didn't get to tell you about the Rasengan," Naruto whispered, and suddenly his mom's eyes widened. "How could I be so stupid?" She groaned and was prepared to slap her forehead, but found that her arm was now transparent. "Naruto, in Konoha, do you know where the hill behind the Hika compound is?" Kushina asked quickly, and Naruto nodded slowly, he was tearing up as he watched his mother disappear. "Yeah, why?" he asked and scooted closer to her. "There is a house up there, hidden within the forest. No one knew about it because there are powerful seals in place, so that it is only detectable by those linked to it by blood. When you enter the forest you will see a large white rock. Cut your thumb and place your blood upon it, you should already be linked to it due to your father's blood. Afterwards keep walking forward and you'll see 5 more white rocks, do the same with each white rock. After you place your blood on all 5 rocks you'll see a house, place your blood on the scroll hanging from the door and you'll be able to enter." Kushina said, and she looked down and gasped when she saw that her entire body was now see-through, her head was the only thing still solid. "The house is small. Single floor and single room with a bathroom. It's yours, but there's something more important than that. In the center of the room is a large futon mat that me and your father used to sleep on. Under it is a trapdoor that opens up to reveal a small cellar where me and your father have placed all of our scrolls and secrets. In there is your true inheritance," Kushina said in desperation, and Naruto nodded, and knowing that his mother's time was short, he threw himself forward and wrapped his arms around her, shocking them both when he found herself caught in his hold. She hesitantly and hopefully raised her arms and was happy when they responded. She wrapped her son in the final hug he would receive from her, and she smiled. "I love you, Naruto," she whispered, and he nodded, fresh tears spilling down. "I love you too, Mom," he whispered. "Make me and your father proud," Kushina said, and Naruto pulled away from her in shock and stared into her eyes. "Mom, my father? Who is he?" he shouted. He had forgotten all about the fact that he didn't know his father. Kushina's eyes widened and she began to speak to him in a quick tone. "Your fath aim. S. Nazi. Nao." Then she was gone. Just like that, Naruto had lost his mother again, and his father's name escaped his grasp. "Damn it." The boy shouted and slammed his fist down into the white floor, but nothing happened. His fist just stopped and he felt no pain. Naruto wiped away his tears and stood to his feet, and as he rose the room around him began to shift and warp until he was back with his old foe. The Kyuubi. The demon was still held by the chains, but when he appeared they began to fade, leaving a very angry demon. "That bitch. She dare hold me back," Kyuubi growled and then roared at Naruto, who stood with his head down, hair obscuring his features. "You weren't gone for that long, mortal. It seemed as though you disappeared and reappeared a few seconds later. Did you get some new power? A pitiful way to attempt to beat me?" The Kyuubi roared and took a step forward, his anger radiating off of his body in waves. The demon was mad at everything in the world right now, he wanted to taste the blonde blood and flesh within his mouth, but people kept interfering. "Yeah, she gave me a new power, she gave me something I never had, nor could I ever hope to get in my life, but now she gave it to me. She gave me a mother's love, something she could only give, and you know something, furball?" Naruto asked in a cold and dark tone, making the Kyuubi stare at him with interest. "I found out why I never had that in the first place, I found out why I don't have that right now." The blonde growled. The Kyuubi began to grin as he saw Naruto about to give up, the boy was shaking in fear and sorrow. "Want to know what took that away?" Naruto asked, laughing slightly as he nodded his head at something. "What, you foolish mortal? End your games and let me feast on you already. I want my freedom." The Kyuubi roared and Naruto waited for the beats to become silent, and he slowly began to look up at the demon that crouched in front of him, waiting to pounce. "A stupid fucking worthless flea bag. The thing that took my mother away from me," Naruto said, and his head snapped up, his eyes were so cold that they could freeze an ice cube. "Was you?" he hissed. The Kyuubi might have been angry, but Naruto was pissed, and he no longer cared about holding the Kyuubi back. He wanted to kill the demon in front of him. This fight was personal. Chapter end. Alright, that's it for today's video guys. Let me know in the comments section how was the story, and also don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I will meet you in another video. Peace out.